Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Tom Stewart here. Our guest today is Jason Cupp. This is Smart Business Moves. Hey, Jason, how in the world are you?
I'm great. I am in cold and soon to be snowy Reno, Nevada today, and we've got a winter storm watch. So I'm literally looking out the window right now, watching it rain, and that's going to convert over to snow at some point as the temperatures drop this evening. But I'm doing great. I'm
Oh,
doing
that
awesome.
get out. So, is this the first snow you've experienced this year?
It is going to be the first snow. I've been, as we were talking about before we went live, I've been in the end of the year dance as well, traveling a ton. Did get a little bit of snow when I was outside of New York City a couple of weeks ago, but nothing to speak of. But the forecast right now is we're going to have 3 to 4, maybe 5 inches of snow on the ground by morning. So it's going to be a pretty big snowstorm. It's going to hit, West Coast, Pacific Coast time. So yeah, it's a little bit bizarre leaving Kansas City, where my home is, and it being in the 60s or 70s this past week, and flying somewhere where you're landing the plane last night in a winter storm warning, right?
Yeah, that is. I don't know. That makes it interesting this time of year. When you're traveling around, you never know what you're going to get, do you?
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. But you also got to be prepared for it. And I, pre-COVID, I did a lot of traveling, and so I'm almost conditioned in the way that I pack my bag, and I travel to make sure that I'm prepared for it being really warm or really cold or snowy or everything in between. So it's kind of part of the deal, right?
Yeah, I remember back when I had a real job and I traveled a fair amount. And I used to do these trips where I would leave home and I'd go to several different waypoints before making my way home. And
Right.
this time of year, a lot of times they would send me to Milwaukee and then they would send me to Southern California. So I had to like pack
Right.
twice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to kind of think through that. And I was in Southern California actually last week, and it was that rare time in Southern California where it was colder in Southern California than it was back at my house in the Midwest. Go figure, right?
You never know.
You do
Well,
never know.
I got a message from Liz a little while ago, and she's
Hmm.
efforting to join us, but at the moment, travel is not her friend, and she was supposed
Hmm.
to be in front of a computer by now, but she's telling me that hang tight, she's on her way. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully she'll be able to join us somewhere along the way. And as everybody knows, this is budgeting and planning month, and Jason's
Hmm.
here to share some thoughts with us on some of his approaches and techniques and thoughts and philosophies on the matter.
Yeah, absolutely. I always find December to be an excellent month. Actually, I would say December and also January, and I'll approach that here in a second, to be excellent months to begin that planning. It's part of the reason that I'm doing a lot of traveling this time of year is going and meeting with clients, seeing their teams, looking at their numbers, trying to figure out the budget items for 2022, and also creating that strategic plan of how we're going to go and accomplish the budget. It's one thing to say we want to do this, but it's also coming up with a plan to be able to do what that plan is. And I think a lot of people, kind of close their eyes and they get out the dart and they throw it and it hits the dartboard. It's like, oh, this is what the goal is going to be. But then they don't, Tom, have a plan for client acquisition and revenue, what is necessary to be able to accomplish that. But then also, which is very important, and I know you all have talked about it a lot, on this show, and we talked about it last time I was on a handful of months ago, the people plan, making sure that we have the people to be able to do the job and what that capacity is, and how we can go and scale our business in that regard. So I think right now, December and January are really key months that every business owner, no matter what industry you're in, is really kind of taking a look at the past year, what's worked, what hasn't worked, what was a success, and what is an opportunity, and then also how are we going to leverage that for the following year, and make something really great out of it. So absolutely, this is a great time to be having that reflection.
Yeah, and you make a number of really good points there. A lot of people think the whole budgeting process is kind of a game of trying to predict the future, being clairvoyant,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's really a tool to grow and build your business and a
Hmm.
tool to help you accomplish business objectives.
Yep.
So, you mentioned the plan part of it, and I guess execution is another
Hmm.
dimension of it that takes place in 2022. But
Hmm.
do you do the budget and then come up with a plan to make the budget happen, or do you come up with like objectives and a plan and then figure out what that budget looks like?
You bring up a really good question. And for years, those that know me well or have heard me speak on this topic know that I sit in two different distinct places. Do you create revenue and then chase it with expense, which means you create the budget, then you go chase it with the plan? Or do you create the expense and then chase it with revenue? You do the opposite of that. And I actually like, especially in light of what we've already, briefly mentioned on today's call, um, that people are hard to find, especially good people are really hard to find. So for me, I almost suggest that you look at what your current capacity is, the folks that you have in your business that you can rely on, and who are they, and what capacity do we have with our current staff? Because one of the biggest things that's been inserted into this budgeting discussion has been a people plan, and making sure that we have all of the people to be able to execute. Because anybody can go and build a budget, which as we all know or should know, right? That budget is what's top line revenue going to be, what's going to be our costs to deliver that revenue, and then what, of course, is going to be the overhead that contributes to that revenue. And I can go through that a little bit later if you'd like. And the reality is that most people, especially entrepreneurs, who tend to have very wide thinking in terms of what their production can be, and they tend to be a little bit more open to to some goals that possibly couldn't be hit. I know that I'm certainly guilty of that in my past entrepreneurial efforts, where I said, "Oh, I'm going to do $1 million this year," but I only did $300,000 in the previous year. So how am I going to make up that $700,000 of additional revenue, right? And so we can be a little bit excited about something, but we don't have a plan to execute it. And I'm here to tell you that you got to have the plan to execute it. And the most important thing in almost any business today, unless you're in tech, is the people plan to execute that. And I know that a lot of the people who would be joining you, that are your friends and clients and followers online, they need people to be able to execute their business. And so you got to have that people plan be very much part of the budget, which is the financial plan.
Yeah, and I mean, especially like this point in time, I know most of the folks who we work with who are watching us now have businesses that they're short staffed, and they've been dealing
Hmm.
with that for some time. And the natural reaction to that is we need to be hiring more. So you
Hmm.
spend more on your recruiting, and you're doing all of these things, just
Hmm.
trying to hire and hire and hire.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, that's an approach, but there's a lot of other things you could be doing in the face of, well, this is the hand I'm dealt. This is the labor force we
Right.
have. Could we be making a whole lot more money by doing other things other than just beating our head against the wall trying to hire people who aren't there at the moment?
Totally agree. It's funny. This was probably like weeks before COVID, right? Um, I was hosting, along with some other colleagues, a group of people down in New Orleans, and one of my clients and friends that was there, he had a great point about the people plan, and I thought it was brilliant. So many business owners, entrepreneurs, management teams, they spend a lot of effort and energy budgeting the acquiring of clients, right? They're constantly marketing and SEO and PPC and Google ads and Facebook videos and all of these great marketing ideas, but they're not willing to make the same investment of time, money, effort, strategy into acquiring the people to serve those clients, right? And
Mhm.
almost they balk at the fact that hiring, especially in today's day and age, is almost a full-time job. You're constantly focused on, or you should be constantly focused on, developing that bench, hiring the next team member, and making sure that you have adequate staffing to be able to accomplish the
And
task at hand, which is run your business.
And you can take that thought a step further and go beyond just the hiring process. We spend a whole lot of time talking about customer service.
Hmm.
And,
Hmm.
it's hard. The word employee service doesn't even, it's not even really part of most of our lexicons, but maybe it
Hmm.
should be, team member service. Be
Hmm.
thinking
Yep,
about
you bet.
not only how do we hire them, but how do we treat them with the same level of customer service as we treat what we call our customers, because our employees are customers too,
Hmm.
right?
Absolutely. And I think y- those of us that are familiar with the financial statements know what a balance sheet is. It's what lists all of the different assets and liabilities and equity in a business. And the number one thing that is not on a balance sheet that is one of your biggest assets is your people. There's no way that
Mhm.
we can put X number of dollars is on the, but boy, you can put a vehicle on there, you can put a computer system, or you can put a building that you buy, or whatever it might be, but you can't put people on there. And people are probably the number one undervalued element that's in a business that you need to be able to run it. And you're so right that there is this incredible focus on customer service, and we talked about this some in our last call, was just building up that culture and really developing ideas to be able to build up that team. And I don't want to take a budgeting and planning and kind of retread what we talked about last time, but I would encourage anybody who's kind of scratching their head going, oh, that sounds like a good idea, to maybe go back and listen to that, because I think we kicked around some really good ideas on how to build up culture, build up teams, some steps and some different things that you can go to do that. But it's really a lost art. And part of the reason that I amplify it and I put an exclamation point, bold it, and underline it in this discussion is I don't want people to go out and build a budget or a strategic plan without a people plan attached to it. It has to be incredibly critical. And I think it's important. And the other thing I want to say on this is that I think that there are a lot of folks that are out there that are running really successful businesses that they're developing their people plan long in advance of them needing those people. They've got a strategy and a plan for what their growth is. They're hiring people now that maybe they don't completely need, but they might need them in 2 months. Because the worst thing that you can do is to try to develop your people plan when you're desperate for it, when there is that need, when you have to chase that revenue. Because the worst thing that you can do is to frustrate a client who's new to your team because you don't have the staff member that's also new to your team to be able to execute that work. And then it just becomes a lot of, shell game in terms of trying to figure out how to get the work done.
The Department of Labor, coins this term or uses this term called human capital and return
Hmm.
on human capital. And we've talked about that in the past. And
Hmm.
um, now more so than ever, like
Hmm.
for, prior to COVID, wages were fairly flat, costs
Sure.
were fairly flat. And, it's never been just super easy to hire people, but it's a whole nother
Right.
world now. So getting the most return off of your human capital, and especially if you have an
Hmm.
opportunity to hire people, knowing that you've got pent up demand, it's no different
Absolutely.
than buying supplies in
Hmm.
bulk, knowing that you may not use it until 3 months from now, but you have it on hand when you need it.
Absolutely. Agree with you 110%. And as you were talking about that, one of the things when you're talking about the human capital and the return on human capital that I was thinking about is just the constant investment, not only in hiring, but then also retaining and building up the team, and making sure that they stick around and that they're a tenured part of the team. And so many are talking about the revolving door, right, of team members. And I think it's critical. But even the one thing that I would insert in on the budgeting conversation now is that, and we talked about it just briefly right before we went live, is that a lot of companies are having the discussion about price increases. And I'm here to say that not only do we need to have a discussion about increasing prices to clients, but we also need to have a discussion about right sizing pay to our team members. Pay is going up. I do not think it's going to go back down. Yes, consumer price index CPI is over 6% now through the end of November. I don't know if you've seen that statistic yet, but it's the 12-month trend is over 6%. I've been watching CPI for a long time, Tom, and I don't know that I've ever seen it at 6%. So that means that everything that we pay for every single day, fuel
We
and rent
did,
and
but it was like
energy.
1981 was the last time that it was that high.
Right, you're probably right. And the reality is that if we really want to continue to retain and attract the team members to help us execute our financial plan, we need to be prepared from a budgeting standpoint to right size their pay as well. I was telling somebody early this morning that back when I was running my landscape company 13 plus years ago, we could hire starting labor for a lot less, maybe half or a little bit more than half of what it costs today. Now, granted, that was a while ago, 13 to 15 years ago. But the truth is that that's just because everything gets more expensive, and we've got to make sure that we're treating our people right from a pay standpoint, and a culturalization standpoint, and all that.
Prior to COVID, you could pretty much take last year's playbook and do it again, the next year,
Yep.
and you're okay. Your costs
Hmm.
are relatively flat. But, I know most companies are paying 50% more for their
Hmm.
line labor now as what they did pre-COVID. So
Yep.
everything's up in the air in terms of what you're charging and what do you need to be paying, 6
Sure.
months from now could be higher than what it is today. It's just very dynamic. So I guess this is really at the heart of, the budgeting and planning process. What worked pre-COVID could get
Hmm.
you into trouble today. You've got to be following the numbers more closely and be more fluid and more dynamic with the whole planning
Hmm.
process. And even what you come up with today, and I'm sure you're going to speak to this, there's a process throughout the year where you use that. So it's
Hmm.
not a static document. You're gonna be
Right.
taking this plan and arguably, changing it on a month-to-month basis if
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I'm probably of the opinion that I don't want the budget to be recast on a regular basis, but I certainly want a budget to actuals to be able to be analyzed. And I do recommend taking a peek at it and possibly doing a recast. Obviously, I can tell you this, that in COVID, people that wrote budgets in the December and January prior to COVID, when we didn't even know that COVID was going to happen, those budgets for a
Mhm.
lot of companies got recast really quick because of an extenuating circumstance, right?
In the face of an unprecedented event in a global pandemic, it's okay to recast your budget.
Right. But in a normal, if there is such thing as a normal typical year, that recast might happen on the quarterly, but probably more appropriately on the 6 month. We knew when I was running my service industry business that we could almost predict what the second half was going to look like based on the first half performance. We knew what those percentage and metrics looked like, and so we could look at our end of June numbers and really, right after the 4th of July, once we had our June numbers, we could really begin to peek into what we thought that the remainder of the year would look like. And where did that come from, Tom? I'll give you a guess. I'm gonna put you on the spot. Where did our assumption of what the second half was going to look like compared to the first half come from?
I would assume that you were just doing a trend line of what the variance was budget to actual for the first half and
Hmm.
applied the same logic to the second.
Yes, but with one distinct variable, which I really want everybody that's listening to pay attention to this, is really, really looking at what past historicals were. We went back 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and we always knew that the percentage of revenue in the first half was very, very similar to a commensurate percentage of revenue and profit and overhead in the second half. And so we were able to really do some predictions because there was a line item. It kind of did this rather than up and down and up and down. And I think that most people in our world that are running businesses that we know about, I think that most people in our world, the thing is that they have pretty predictable revenue based on the month or the quarter. There's predictions that you can kind of go through relative to those numbers, and I think that's something that I really want everybody to understand. That one of the things that I've developed in my years of budgeting, working with people in their financials, is that historicals play a very, very, very important role to what potentially is going to be happening in the future. And so many people take pie to the sky when they're planning a budget and they're just thinking about the future. But I would really encourage people who have good data in terms of numbers to look at the past, because the past is going to be a really good predictor of what the future is going to be with an investment in growing the business. Did that make sense? Or did I
Oh,
gobble that up too
absolutely.
much? Okay.
No, I mean there's seasonality in a lot of industries. I mean, I'm absolutely sure that in the landscaping business, there's things happening in the summertime that's
Hmm.
not happening in the winter, and vice
Right.
versa.
Sure.
House cleaning is kind of the same thing. The
Hmm.
term spring cleaning actually means something to a lot of people, and
Sure.
then school kind of does its thing, and then during the summer when school is out, a lot of times there's a drop in demand. But it depends where you are. If you're in a market
Hmm.
that is heavily weighted towards vacation type
Hmm.
business, you can see an upswing. And then you get business, towards the holidays, everything gets busy. And then January,
Sure.
people get their credit card and figure out they spent more for the holidays than they meant to. And then there's a drop in the business. And you can
Right.
kind of count on those up and downs year after year.
Sure. And I have to imagine there's probably maybe a little bit more with, family being over or holiday parties occurring, that maybe there's a little bit more investment around the holidays and kind of getting in and getting a kind of a deep down clean. It's interesting. I thought about you guys. If you recall, just very shortly after our last session, we were both going to be on the East Coast at about the same time. I think I was going to be in North Carolina, and you guys were doing something in North Carolina as well. And one of the interesting things, the place I was staying, it really relates to the cleaning industry. The place that I was staying was normally on a weekly cycle of being rented on vacation. I happened to be staying at a home that was owned by the owners, with the owners. But the amazing thing that they told me, I really thought about this from a financial perspective, it does play into this conversation, is that they have a move in and a move out day in this heavy vacation part of the country in North Carolina along the beach. And it was always on Saturdays. And I thought about all of your friends and colleagues that they had to do a whole bunch of projects, get in and clean all of these beach homes on a Saturday. No, you can't do it on Sunday. No, you can't do it on Monday. And what the impact of that was to budget and how they had the resources. I thought about that from the people plan and the strategic plan, as I learned that almost all of the vacationers moved out on a Saturday, and then the new people moved in on a Saturday. And there was a very short time period, maybe 6 or 8 hours, depending on the property, to be able to get everything cleaned and linens done. And I was blown away by that. I'm sure you guys have addressed that before on your show.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I'm located in Charleston, South Carolina, so
Okay.
I am intimately familiar with the whole exercise of doing vacation rentals. Personally, our business doesn't do as much of it as we used to, but there was a time maybe when I was hungrier, I guess, quite frankly, that we would turn 100+ units, on a Saturday, and it was a heck of a logistical effort. And there's a
Wow.
lot of ins and outs and details and tricks to making that work. But yeah, that's a material part of a lot of people's business, and some of it's in the South doing, like vacation rentals for beach properties, and I know a lot of people up north that are doing it as well for ski. I mean, all over the country, there's vacation rental turns that turn on a weekly basis.
Yeah. One reason I bring it up is that I really thought, as we talk about capacity, that has to build in some capacity where there's only a certain number of properties that you can turn. And obviously, I know that not everybody does vacation. It made me think about what the capacity is for those businesses who have a large focus or a large book of business in vacation cleaning. And it just made me think they have that one window and they have to get a lot of work done. And once that window is over with, their revenue needed to pivot to some other type of revenue that would not be vacation, because that was that one window. So
Yeah, or sometimes you just hire a bunch of temporary labor for the season, if you will, and leverage your organization and your senior people to kind of direct them and still kind of do your core business through the summer. But
yep.
definitely from a
Excuse me.
budgeting standpoint, you need to plan, and there's different costs and additional revenue to go along with that. But and a plan, you certainly can't wait until June to start putting your plan together for doing vacation rentals, and if you're doing it for in a place where summer's the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you want to talk a little bit in detail about budgeting and the kind of the strategic plan that I really recommend. I'm walking lots of
Yeah.
people through this. So the first step that I always tell people to do is that they need to look at their business from a.
And Jason,
from a,
before you go too deep into that,
Mhm.
just so our
Sure.
audience knows, you are in high demand and you travel all over the country, basically sharing the same information you're sharing with us
Mhm.
today, right?
Yes, that is true. Or via Zoom. I mean, in the world of COVID, it seems like that we're in Zoom. Hey, look who's joining us.
Finally.
Hey,
Hey,
Liz.
Liz.
Hey, y'all.
How's it
I'm so sorry
going?
I'm late.
No worries.
Traveling has not been your friend, has
Oh
it?
my gosh, you You know it, Tom. It's the truth.
Well, so the reality is since travel took you away, you have to cover the next 25 minutes because Tom and I have been covering for you. So,
I'm exhausted.
We're exhausted. It's been very awkward.
All right. Well, the only reason Tom does these is because he thinks they're so fun. So I know I'm not in any danger here. I know he's been having a good time over there. What did I miss, you guys?
We've just been talking about kind of strategic planning and end of the year and beginning of the year. And I was actually just getting ready to jump into it. And Tom was kind of creating a little bit of a basis that, some of your viewers might not know who I am and what I do and how I do it. And so we were kind of starting to unpack that a little bit before I start sharing some of the details. So
nice.
Anyway, so good to see you, Liz.
All right. Thanks, Jason. You too.
So Tom, to answer that question, yes. So 15 plus years ago, I developed a financial system that's based completely on metrics that I've got hundreds of companies across the United States and a few up north in Canada that they use to run their businesses, their service industry businesses. And so this time of year, it's doing that strategic plan, understanding what worked, what didn't work, and then also beginning to build the following year plan. And so this is not just something that resides just kind of in the back of my head. It's actually in the front of my head every single day. In fact, Liz, I told Tom and all the viewers earlier that I'm actually in a client's office today doing exactly that.
Nice.
And so but I told them in advance that I had this scheduled. So we just arranged our agenda so that I could get a little private time to spend an hour with you all. And so anyway, yeah, this is what I do. Lots of face-to-face, really looking into numbers and understanding what they are and helping great business owners and entrepreneurs make decisions about what their business is going to look like financially.
Very cool. I love it.
That is awesome.
See, I want props because I'm the one that got Jason for our guest.
You did.
Way to go, Liz. Good job.
You did. Thank you. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
But that doesn't mean you can take the rest of the day off, though.
All right. Message heard.
So for me, the first focus in all of this is always just to really look at what has worked in the business in the past. To sit down this time of year as we're approaching the holidays, and I know that business keeps going on, but we might be able to take a couple of moments to really analyze, what worked in the past year. What were the challenges? What were the bottlenecks? What were the stresses? What were the pain points? And I recommend almost getting out of your regular element. I usually tell my clients, go, if you live in a nice part of the United States, go sit on a park bench. Leave your phone at home. Take a pad of paper. Write things down. If you have a quiet space in your home or your office or whatever it is, but try to get outside of your normal environment and really kind of review the year. I'm pretty well known amongst my friends and even clients that I do that on New Year's Eve every single year. Weirdly enough, I'll usually go get dinner, sometimes by myself or with some close friends, and I'm really reflective about life and what worked in business, what didn't work in business, what challenges we had, and really try to back myself into the things that worked because I want to duplicate them, the things that didn't work because I want to fix them, and the things that were pain points because I want to understand them more so that I can create opportunities to fix them. Nice. And people or processes or situations that were bottlenecks so that I can understand them and either delete them. Way back when I started this consulting company, we did marketing consulting. It was a total pain point. And it didn't work. And so we don't do that anymore. And people ask us to help them with that, even though my formal education is in marketing and branding. It just wasn't something that made sense for us as a company because it was an extreme pain point and bottleneck. Mm-hmm. And so, so I think that the first step is to have a real conversation with yourself about what worked, what didn't work, what opportunities there are. And that's where you have to start the budgeting process, because you might realize that the pain point was on quality control or on training or pricing or too much debt or whatever it is. And your budget needs to reflect a solution for that, right? And so it does play into, because I believe that budgeting really overlaps with strategic planning. if you, and Liz, that was one thing that Tom and I were talking about is that if you plan a budget and you don't have a plan to execute that budget, might as well not spend the time doing a budget, because you're just probably not going to be the level of success. So I believe that first step is a strategic plan, understanding what worked in the past, understanding what didn't work, so that can play into a conversation about budget.
So the whole chicken and the egg question, what comes first, I guess, is the plan, because a lot of people sit down in front of a spreadsheet and start cranking out a bunch of numbers, but without a clear plan as to what it is that you're going to be making happen within your business, you don't really have a basis to put numbers to.
Actually, that's not what I heard. What I heard, that's step number 2. That step number 1 is reflection.
Correct.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And I think it'd be easy to forget that. I think it would be easy to just kind of blow that off. I love this strategy. Let's reflect first. Let's find out what did work, what didn't work, and let's create our plan from there. I think that's great. I love that little piece.
I agree with you, Liz, and I think, Tom, it's a very close second. I think they go hand in hand, that when we identify, I mean, the number one question that we always have to ask ourselves in business is why. Why was something great? Why was something not great? Why did we have a good year? Why did we not have a good year? Why did we make money? Why did we not make money? Why does this one employee work out? Why did that other employee not work out? Whatever it is, we got to ask the question why. And when we know the answer to the question why, then we can put solutions in to solve it.
Let's drill on that for a second, because the reflection part makes sense, and for a lot of reasons. Are you sitting there with just a notepad staring out, into the sky, or do you have like data and numbers, and what material do you use to do the assessment as to what worked and what didn't work?
I oftentimes recommend that the first step of reflection is almost like a trip down memory lane, not with data, but with what you observed, what you saw, what you experienced as a leader, and then you back that up with data. And oftentimes in my world, that comes from financial data, historicals. And so I do really firmly believe that you have to kind of think, and you got to kind of rewind the tape, is what I always say. Rewind the tape and pay attention to what happened, because business, at least for most people, myself included, maybe not so much for you all, is very, very, very fast moving. I often say that we're in a dinghy, a small little boat, and there's an ocean, and it's roaring between two very high, like hills or mountains, and the dinghy's just banging up against the side of the water, and very few business owners have this just really opportunity to have thought throughout the course of the year. I know some do. Most people that I know, they're moving pretty fast. And they're maybe not paying attention to everything that they need to. And so to take that time to get into an environment to think through that, and then back it up with data, which is what I do. I usually do not get involved in that esoteric conversation. I'll listen to it, and I'll look at it, and I'll look at what they put on the points. But my job is to go back and then find the data that supports either the solution, the opportunity, or the next move.
I bet you sometimes you find that the problems they think they're having really aren't the problems that they're having. It's just the symptom that they see.
I would agree with that. I mean, I have some people that come to me that say that they are incredibly inefficient, and that they're that maybe they're concerned about their team or the team's ability to get things done. And then I run their efficiency numbers, and I run the data, their loaded labor rate, their overhead recovery, all of those numbers, and they point directly towards a high level of success. So then I have to peer in to say, well, why did you think it wasn't efficient? And if you can give me good examples of why it isn't efficient, guess what? These numbers are great, and they can just get better if we can solve that problem. And that usually is a light bulb moment for people, because when I can go at it and I can give them the percentages and say, this is what the industry should be, right? And they are within what I would call a range of success, that's actually really energetic for most business owners. It's also the opposite of that when we realize that the range of success is not in a place that it needs to be. And that's when we got to roll our sleeves up and figure out that why that I mentioned earlier and go and solve it. Is it a pricing problem? Is it an efficiency problem? Is it an overtime problem? Is it the way you buy materials? Is it the way that you schedule? Is it your density? Is it the type of clients you're attracting? You got to figure out the why, because you got to go and solve it. You got to go and solve it.
Yeah,
the number of times that we've been working with someone who swears that they have a marketing problem, and after looking at it a little bit, you've got tons of leads. You aren't even answering the phone.
Yeah.
So
right. You have a follow up and a conversion problem at that point, right?
Yeah.
Right.
All right. So I'm really excited hearing this because it's prompting this really cool thing in my brain. I'm not sure how to make this work, but in our groups, in our strategic success groups, every month, everybody in the group does their highs and lows for business, personal, and family. So now I'm thinking, I already have all of the soft data about what worked and what didn't work in these areas over the course of the last year. Like we can just compile all of that stuff quickly and do a quick review without having to sit there and try to remember. You're not going to be able to remember all that stuff, but the stuff that we have written down over the course of 12 months, this is what really happened. This was where the highs really were. This is what your lows really were. And look, 7 months out of 12, your lows were you didn't have enough employees. Right?
Right.
That's kind of easy thing to look at now. I love this. I think it's going to be super helpful.
Liz, I love it too, because you're already, what you just described is you already have a format and a box in which people are collecting that data. And so really it's a review and to find the trends. I mean, I believe, interestingly enough, and of course we never know the way these conversations are going to go. But I believe that business is all about finding the trends, finding the things, like I said earlier, that have worked and that haven't worked. And when we find things that worked, we go and we duplicate them. When we find that things that don't work, we find the solution to them, and then we repackage them, we repurpose them, and then hopefully they're going to work, and then we go and duplicate them. Yeah. It's finding the trends, right?
Yeah. I really like to find trends in thinking and trends in behavior. They're hard. Both of those things are hard to fix. Like, why do you keep thinking the same bad thing over and over again? Or why do you keep... So this is a great one that popped up today, actually, in our managers group. So one of the managers was saying she didn't get one of her tasks done that she was supposed to get done for the week. And then they have to say why they didn't get it done. And her reason was because all of these things popped up over the course of the week. And what came out very quickly is that is a bottleneck for every single person in the managers group. We just thumbs up. If this happened to you in the last week, thumbs up. And every single person agreed that happens to them. And nobody knows how to fix it. I mean, they do know how to fix it, but nobody thinks, they don't drill down on that problem like you're talking about and actually fix it so that it doesn't repeat itself. They're like, I'm just going to try not to take on so much stuff. I'm going to,
Right.
And so that's super useful for moving forward, for planning, especially going into the new year, I think.
I totally agree with you. And I will tell you that the bottleneck that I see the most is actually the person who's identifying the bottleneck. It's the business owner, it's the manager.
Always.
And no, it literally it often is. I don't know if you're joking in agreement. Okay,
I'm not joking. I'm dead serious.
If you're the CEO, you're more than likely the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, possibly. And here's the crazy part about that is that oftentimes the way that the business owner no longer becomes the bottleneck, which we're going back to a strategic and budgeting element, is to hire people to work alongside them. Last time we met, we talked a lot about the people quotient and culture and hiring people and all those different types of things. And, and one of the things I probably said, I don't remember everything that I said is that, I've got team members in my organization that are the polar opposite of me. And that's very much by design. That's very much to address a bottleneck, and that bottleneck, guess what, is me, is me, because I need to have a team who just like you and your team, or the people who are watching their team, we need people around us who are the opposite of us, because oftentimes we're the bottleneck, and to hold us accountable. And I have no problem with that idea of being held accountable, but guess what? That costs money, but that usually opens up opportunity. So when you get rid of the bottleneck, there's opportunity that opens up. And then all of a sudden that hire, or that strategic person on the team, then all of a sudden that really becomes something that is a budget item, costs money, but it delivers a bigger business, or more profits, or a smoother operation, or better yet, even a work-life balance.
Well, and what we like to say here on this show, we say it all the time, is yes, it's going to cost money. You're going to have a bigger line item in your budget, but at the end of the month, 6 months, a year, you're going to have more money in your pockets. And
absolutely,
that's the bottom line. Is is it going to net profit, or is it just going to ease you? In some ways, like it's what you can do, so it's what you're going to do. You don't want to do it just because you can.
You're investing in your organization.
Yeah, you really are. And I call it short-term pain for long-term gain. You invest short-term, whether that's time or money, for the ability to have a long-term gain of growing the organization. And a lot of business owners, they're afraid of that. They have a fear of investment, that they're going to lose their investment. And I'd rather bet on myself than the stock market or other things that are, less in my control. I mean,
how do you help them over that, Jason?
Well, it's number one, I think. So the thing that I always like to do, so I'm a metrics guy. So my entire budgeting process is largely based on metrics, not dollars, but on metrics. And so when you have metrics, so let's say, make the math easy and say we have $100,000 a year business, and it costs us 40% to get the work done. Okay. So it's 40% in labor and materials and subcontractors. And that's usually the definition that I operate from: material, labor, and subcontractors. And that's labor to get the work done. That's not sales labor, administrative labor, or owner's labor. So if you're running a cost of goods sold percentage of 40%, which means a gross profit of 60%, you can use that metric at $200,000, at $300,000. And yeah, it might adjust up and down a little bit, but it's like the client that I'm with now, I've been with them for a while, and I know their growth, and their cost of goods sold has stayed right around the same, even as we've hired more people and given people raises and so on and so forth. And so you can use that metric, and I will utilize that to say, all right, you're doing $100,000 at a 40% COGS, which means a 60% gross profit. And let's say to make the math easy, your overhead is 40% as well. So you got 40% in COGS and 40% in overhead, which means 20% net profit. Okay. I will use that metric of 40% in COGS to prove to them that if they have a $500,000 business and they can keep their COGS at 40%, that their overhead is no longer 40%, because overhead doesn't go up at the same amount. It will actually go down some, because there's variable expenses and fixed expenses. Fixed expenses would be things like the owner's salary, or rent, or maybe technology, or utilities, or whatever it might be. And then variable overhead would be things like advertising, recruiting, insurance, fuel, if you've got a bunch of vehicles out on the road. Those are all variable based on top line dollars. Merchant account, if you charge credit cards, so on and so forth. Your variable expenses are going to be tied to revenue, but your fixed expenses are not nearly as tied to revenue. So that 40% at $500,000 might actually be 35%, right? And business owners need to understand the relationships of all of those metrics. So how do I get them over that? I show it to them in black and white with actual spreadsheets that say your business is 100 now, it can be $500,000, and the metrics are going to play through. Your overhead's going to be less, and you're going to make more money. Why aren't you investing in the variable overhead of hiring an account manager per se, or an operations person, or some technology in your business? Go and invest in it, because you're going to make more money.
But how do you convince them that they're not going to lose the money? Didn't you say that that's what they're afraid of, that they're going to lose the money, that it won't pay off?
Showing them. So there's two ways of doing that. Number one is showing them formas that pro forma would be a financial module that would show them what the future performance of the company could be if they go and do an act. The other one is give them case studies. Case studies are the number one thing that, guys and gals like you and I, that we utilize. We tell, I don't mean to, I don't want to say stories, but we share experiences of people that we know in business that say, I know of a company who went from 1 to 5. They invested in software, they invested in an operations person, they invested in a different type of vehicle, and this is what it did to them. You can be the same. And when they hear over and over and over again case studies and pro formas that prove that, and there's a track record with somebody like me or like the two of you that have been able to successfully do this in companies, they're going to be a lot more apt to go and make that investment with less risk.
They're going to make
and you're using the term making the investment. And Liz, before you got here, we were kind of talking about all the unprecedented events that have, we've been dealing with over the last couple of years. Yeah. And it is the time to do planning for 2022. And for a lot of businesses out there, they're sitting on cash that they've never had before. And they're trying to figure out what to do with it. And, this isn't a one size fits all type solution here, but for some businesses, hiring, that key person that can, strengthen where the current organizational weaknesses are could have a material impact on growth. And that would be part of the planning process, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, 110%. Most people that I know that didn't go do something silly with the cash balances that they have, there's a lot of people out there in the business world that did silly stuff, and not real fond of those stories, but there are people that we probably all know that did silly stuff. Others have invested heavily in their business, and most notably in people, as we talked about. Liz, Tom and I were talking about just the investment in people, that the best businesses are investing in people almost before they need them. They're hiring that next key person. They're hiring that key account manager or salesperson or operations person or quality control or whatever, a trainer. And maybe that's not somebody that they would have hired 2 or 3 years ago before they had the cash balances that they do or the strength of a balance sheet. And that is key and paramount to be able to have confidence. And I'm having lots of discussions, and you're right, Tom, you nailed it. A lot of people would not ever have the ability to do that because they were just fighting maybe to stay alive or whatever it is. And the truth is that people need to be very strategic about where they're going to go and invest. There's I would call them a mainstream person that's out there that has been pretty religious about saying that sales solves everything. If you can sell, sell, you're going to make a profit. I vehemently disagree with that statement. And I really, really, really think that people need to understand that they need to learn how to make a profit and then go and invest in that machine to go and continue to make a profit.
Yes.
Well, there was a time in this industry, Jason, where people didn't really have the tools to do the things that they can do now from a managing profit standpoint.
Right.
They really didn't even know, how many homes they were cleaning each month. All they knew was, book a job, send somebody to clean it, and hope there's enough money in the checking account at the end of the month to, pay all of the bills. Sure. But now, this is like almost 2022. Businesses have all this wealth of data that the technology they're investing in, that you can really manage a profit-driven model in ways that you really didn't have much of a chance to do in the past, at least in the house cleaning industry.
I think in most industries, Tom, I think that completely kind of almost barrels into a lot of other industries. And I work in a lot of different industries, not just service industry companies. And I see that in a lot of companies right now that they now have these tools, whether it be, like you said, software or just data or education. Education is changing as well. People can get knowledge in a completely different way. Even just this medium, to be able to jump on to social media and watch an hour of content and to have that hopefully, be something that they can pull one nugget out that they could take back into their business. It didn't used to be that way. We used to get on planes and get in cars and drive and go to events, which I know we all still do. But now being able to get good education is really simple to do. So there's knowledge that's out there that's just a second away. And I think that the great business owners are adapting that knowledge and using it for that strategy and using it for some financial wherewithal and really doubling down on increasing their business. And, as we've said many times, it's usually in people. It's usually in people, or it's in a change in product, like thinking about doing what you do in a little bit of a different way than the way you've done it before. Because if you don't change along with, consumer habits, then you're going to be a Xerox or a Polaroid, which is a much different company today than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
So Robin has a question here. Can you see it, Jason, up on the screen?
Oh, yeah. I guess if I look, invest in the people first and chase the revenue. Well, that's interesting, Robin. I don't know if you were on earlier when I used the idea of do you build the income and chase it with expense, or do you build the expense and chase it with revenue? I actually think that right now, this is what I think is going on with clients. And I don't know if this is true with the folks that Robin, but I think that your clients, they expect more. I think that they expect a great company to work with, and price is certainly a portion of that. But if you're running a good company, I think that you need to have really great people to execute whatever your brand promises to your clientele. And if you have great people that are going to execute that, then the revenue is going to come. And I really do think that you can almost create the expense, especially those that are sitting on those balance sheets that we were just talking about. You can create the expense of great people, and you're going to be able to easily chase it with revenue, especially if you have clients who are asking for quotes and the phone's ringing and your marketing or branding or client acquisition strategies are working. I really do think that you can invest in the people first and then chase those people with revenue and build out. Because my data would suggest, as I talk to more and more companies, that people are really investing in people in advance of really needing them and building a business of revenue around that. And if it doesn't work, then you can go through and you can prune out some of the branches of the people that you have to right size the people back to the business that you do have. But I think if you're sitting on a balance sheet that's strong, absolutely go and invest in people. People's the hardest part to find right now. I think clients are relatively easy, and I think they're ready to hire a really great company. And I have to imagine if you're joining us today, you've got a really great company. And so go and do that, because I think that you'll be able to deliver some satisfaction to those clients by having the people that can execute.
So part of that, we've talked about putting the budget together, but we haven't really spent a whole lot about executing on that budget. And, we've got a few minutes left. Could you take a few minutes, Jason, and just kind of paint a picture for us for what happens the 12 months following putting our budget together, what we're supposed to be doing with it?
Absolutely. The number one thing is, don't write a budget and then put it in a drawer and never look at it again. A budget should be a month-to-month budget, not an annual budget. You can start with an annual budget if that's what your comfort level is. Say, this is what I want my revenue to be. This is what my cost to be. This is what all my overhead categories to be. But you got to look at it January, February, March, and so on and so forth. And Tom, that goes back to what we were talking about a moment ago about how there's definitely trends in certain months that maybe have a little bit higher revenue than others. So you've got to divide it by month. And then when the actuals come in, you've got to compare those actuals to what you budgeted. I have people that write budgets all the time and they just put them in a drawer and they never look at them. And then they have a bad year and they wonder why. And I go, well, what's your actual to budget? Oh yeah, that's right. I did write that budget. They tend to forget they put in all of this time, around the end of the year to build a budget. And so I think the number one step is to compare actuals to budget. Part of the reason,
do you refer to that as, back when I had a real job, that was one of the things I had to do. They call that variance analysis. And whenever the difference between the budget and the actual was over so many percentages, I had to write an explanation as to why.
I don't know what your real job was, but that just sounds incredibly cumbersome to me. I think small business.
Well, I don't have that job anymore. I'll quit.
I don't do it that way, but I do look at trends. I'll give you an example. In October, so it was the first week in November, I was reviewing a client's actual financials, and they lost $82,000 for the month. They lost $82,000 a month. That is not what the plan was. And so we immediately had to look at, we had to immediately, right. We had to immediately look at the why. I mean, we stopped everything in its tracks, because if it's 82 in October and 52 in November and 32 in December, we've got a burn of cash that is insurmountable, and we're not going to make it. So we got to stop everything that we do, and we have to look at it. So analysis of numbers and asking that key question, why, that I mentioned at the top of our broadcast today, is super, super, super powerful. So I don't like the variances. I like to say, why are the numbers this way? Well, guess what? We quickly figured out why it was negative 82. And we got that down to, it was not negative 82. It was some clerical issues. It was an employee that was on their way out the door. There were some things that weren't billed. They had issued bonuses. They had done all kinds of different things in that month that just made that month look really poor. And when we went through and we looked at it, we were able to whittle that down to something that was much more manageable. But the P&L still said negative 82. And a business owner that ignores that, what if that was the gift that kept on giving? What if there was some dramatic changes in pricing or efficiency or overtime or overhead or debt or pay or commissions or something that was going to repeat itself in November and possibly December? That would have been detrimental to the business, right? And so that is one of the biggest ways, is that I can't tell you how important it is to look at your historical numbers in comparison to your current numbers, in comparison to your budget. It's a three-pronged element. You look at January of 2022 in comparison to January of 2021. What was the revenue? What was the cost? Run those metrics and those percentages. What were the overhead? That's your variance, or your potential variance. Then you look at your 2022 to what your budgeted 2022 is, and you look at where you hit the mark or where you didn't hit the mark. You've constantly got to be looking at numbers. Business owners or managers that put the budget in the drawer and not look at it or compare it to the past history, they're playing, they have good intention, but poor execution, and they're probably going to be, bit financially because they're not going to be paying attention to it.
So here's the deal that I have found with this, our industry specifically, because our cash flow is so strong, right? We get cash almost daily coming into this business. You can float for a really, really long time in a world of deficit without having really making any money, because you have cash coming in. So you're paying, you're paying in arrears, but we see that a lot. That people that, when you actually run the numbers, you didn't make any money this month,
right?
Right. Last month. So, and they could do that for quite a long time.
Yeah, the old saying, "How'd you go broke?" And I said, "Well, it was really slow at first, and then very fast at the end."
Tom, I don't know if you saw, Robin had a question for Jason also.
Oh, yeah, you bet. Would you use a revenue run rate from the last 3 months average to forecast future runs? Absolutely. Especially in this business, I think that is a really smart way to do it, because you're looking at what the trend was. Again, looking at the historicals, what the trend was over the last couple of months to try to figure out what your revenue is going to be for the future. Now, obviously, if you pick up, Robin, a really large client, you'd want to make an adjustment to that revenue because you'd know that the revenue would be higher. But yes, I love historicals. That's the way that I budget. I look at historicals. I analyze historicals because I believe, as I said earlier, the history, the back history, which is all things that happened in the past. The only way that you're able to predict the future is to look at the history, is to look at the history in the past to be able to make projections for what the future would hold.
It's so important to have good data.
And we talked about, but we were talking about the seasonality part of this as well. So if you look at your history, and if you know that January is always lower than December, then this January might be higher than last January if your numbers are trending up, but you might want to make some adjustments for the seasonality of your business.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really coach clients to do, and this is just such a big topic, we could really talk about it for hours, to be honest, is I tell people, if we're going to base it on history, go and run your P&L in the accrual. And Liz, that kind of helps those that don't know the difference between cash and accrual, feel free to send me a note, and I'll be happy to record a video or whatever to explain the difference between cash and accrual. But the quick answer is accrual is revenue and expenses in real time as they're being earned or accrued, where cash is deposits into the bank account versus money that goes out of the bank account. You want to run your business budgeting from an accrual. Don't let any CPA, don't let any consultant tell you that you need to run it on cash, because then you're just going to be following the trends of cash flow, which is that dangerous place that Liz was talking about earlier. You need to run it on the accrual. What I tell people to do, run your P&L for those that want to go through this process, run your P&L once December numbers are done, January through December, and sort it by month. So you have January's numbers, February numbers, March numbers, and so on and so forth. Dump that into Excel, and then copy that part of the Excel into another exact same mirror image. One of them is your 2022 budget, and you go in and you change your 2021 numbers based on growth of business, change in expenses, change in what your costs would be. And you can always go to that other tab at the bottom of Excel to go back and look at what the historicals are, to say, oh, rent was always $1,500 a month, but I know in March it's going to go to $1,800 a month. And you can go in and then you can look at those history. And so you're constantly comparing what the past was to what the current was. And that spreadsheet can be built and can then determine what your total positive cash flow would be.
You know, Jason, we might need to have you come back and we could have a whole discussion just on that, because I know some people are going to jump into QuickBooks and run a P&L, and they can see that they've got a little toggle where they can do it cash and accrual. And
right,
depending on how you've got your books set up, if you've got an annual bill and you paid it all in January, and you can say accrual, but it really isn't going to give you the accrual information that you want to see. There's a little more to it than that, but that would be a good discussion. And Jason, you're getting to the point where you're going to earn the title of Smart Business Moves contributor. You're going to be. We'll give you like a bottom third. That.
Thank you.
All right, so hopefully you guys see that we have Jason's website up here, jasoncupp.com, and it's CUPP. So anybody interested in getting more information, reach out to Jason. Of course, he'll be happy to help you. He'll even create a little video for you about the difference between cash basis and accrual basis. Tom, I don't know if you saw that Linda has a question. Linda, we're out of time. That's too big of a question to get here at 3:01 or 6:01 or whatever time it is right now. But maybe you could hit us up on Wednesday with that question.
Yeah, we'll be back. We'll be back Wednesday.
Yeah.
Same bat time, same bat channel. 5 o'clock Eastern. Liz will be here.
4 o'clock Central. Got it.
That's right. Jason, you are awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
An hour out of your day while you're traveling and everything else.
No, he's working. He's working at another client's office.
I am. No, seriously, I am. And as soon as I get up here, I go back into budgeting process. So
good. I love it.
No rest for the crazy, right?
That's right.
Thank you guys.
So
really
much
appreciate
again,
it.
Jason. Appreciate it.
Take care. Be good. Bye-bye.
Bye.